Okay, this video is how living in Chile tweaked my mind. I'm doing this video because Krishna's little helper asked me to do this video. I do videos by request, by the way, and if anybody ever requested me to do a video and I never did it, it's because I forgot. So you just have to remind me. It's not because I don't want to do it, it's just because I simply forgot. Silly me. Whoopsie. Adam Baskey, you're so weird, but you are sexy. I've seen your pictures. A basket of apples gave them to me, and I play with myself every time I see you. You're the only man that I play myself with, looking at pictures of. I like that little tuft of hair you have between your nipples. Anyways, what was this video about? Oh yeah, living in Chile. How living in Chile like tweaked my mind. Yeah, I mentioned it in one of my videos. I can't remember which one. Oh yeah, living in Chile tweaked my mind. So he's like, oh yeah, do a video about that basket of apples. No, not basket of apples. Christian's Little Helper. I think Christian's Little Helper and Basket of Apples actually know each other. Maybe Christian's Little Helper is Adam Baskey. Whatever. So yeah, how living in Chile tweaked my mind. Living in Chile tweaked my mind because, and there is a moral to the story. I don't just want to talk trash about a certain kind of person, but the moral of the story is that we have got to allow poor people to have dignity, and we need to close the gap between the rich and the poor, money-wise, and that fixing problems in society are the responsibility of everybody. Because the main thing about Chile, with me, and how it tweaked my mind is that there's this huge chasm, this huge difference between the rich and the poor. And I lived there for 5 years, and like I learned stuff living in there on a soul level, like a deep emotional level, that I wouldn't have learned if I was only there 4 years. I learned stuff there 5 years that I didn't know in 4 years, and of course I learned stuff 4 years that I didn't know 3 years, and you learn stuff if you stay in a place for 6 months that you wouldn't know when you first go there. But 5 years is a long time. I was married to a girl, sweet little girl, lived with her and her family, and she was poor. They were the poor people. So I was familiar with the poor people. But I was also familiar with the rich people because I was an English teacher and I gave English classes to a lot of rich people. And so I saw the poor people and I saw the rich people. And Chile is very weird because the poor people are different from the rich people. And it's kind of like, and, you know, Chile is kind of like the past. It's like going into the past. I just finished watching 3 seasons of The Tudors, which is about King Henry VIII. And those people, it was kind of like I was back in Chile. The way that they act, it's similar to Chile. Going to Chile is kind of like it's kind of like going back in time, because they act like they did back in time, and they have all the whole classism like they did back in time. Now, when I say how living in Chile tweaked my mind, is that it really did kind of tweak my mind in a way that it freaked me out a little bit after like 4.5 years, or after like until maybe like a month or 2 before I left. You know how you get last day of school syndrome, and you get the plane ticket and you see that you're going to go home, and then next thing you know you just have to go home, and then it kind of like you relive your life there, and then you're like, you have to go home. And that's kind of, I felt like I was in a pressure cooker the last 3 weeks before I left. And I just kind of had these feelings that I didn't have after 4 years. And some of the feelings that I had was like, I started getting really like cynical, like not liking Chileans. I'd call them raisin heads, not to them, but that was like my pet name for Chileans, raisin heads, because out of the periphery of my eye, when I would see their heads, I would see raisins for heads. Like I'd see their bodies are normal size, but I would see a tiny little head. And I think I was seeing like their aura out of the periphery of my mind. And like Chileans have, big hearts, and the aura in their heart is chakra, and their heart is strong, but their head is shriveled. They're the raisin heads because their brains weren't turned on. These were the poor Chileans. I don't know. I don't think I looked. Well, the rich Chileans too, but in a different way. Yeah, they didn't use their heads. I also called them dirt bags. Not as a derogatory word, but as an actual literal, perfectly descriptive way of what they are. And a dirt bag is this this unit of beautiful potentiality. Dirt. You can grow anything in dirt. We live off dirt. We grow our fruits and vegetables off dirt. Dirt is great, but when it's in a bag, it's not growing anything. It's not taking in any sun or water or nutrients. It's just kind of dormant. And the longer you leave it like that, it'll eventually, grow a whole bunch of, it'll lose all of its moisture and turn into a rock, and you can't use it for anything, or it'll grow some kind of fungus and become rotten, and then you won't use it for dirt that way. So the dirt is like potentiality that needs to be cut open and released to the rest of the world. And that's kind of how I looked at Chileans as well, like dirt bags. And I just having closed minds. It was like I think it's related to the Catholic Church. Chileans are difficult to talk to, but one really interesting weird thing about Chileans is that there's different kinds of Chileans, and the rich are different from the poor. And I think they take up the extremes of every single personality. Like you could choose an extreme of anything and then say that's what a Chilean is. You could say they're the coldest, rudest people in the world. And yeah, there's Chileans there who just scowl at you on the street and are just like, do stuff that are like, that's not nice. Like I remember I went on this backpacking trip for like 3 weeks in the mountains, and I was coming home, and I was in the subway, and I was tired because I'd been hiking all day, and I leaned up against the central pole. And I guess I was slouching a little bit on it, but I wanted to like stand up again. But by then there was this guy who had put his hand on the pole, and he was holding it tight, and I couldn't bring my shoulder up, so I had to like stay hunched. But there was nothing above the guy's hand. He had his hand down low, and I was like kind of pushing up a little bit. And I looked at him, and I was like pushing my shoulder up against, and he was like scowled at me like, I will never let go. This is where I have my hand. And it was weird, dude. Like there was no reason for him to move his hand a couple inches higher. It wouldn't have been any harder for him to do that. And it was just that kind of thing, like doing shit that doesn't make any sense at all. Well, I don't know where that came from, but well, yeah, that was the example how they can be like the coldest people in the world. Well, you could also say that they're the warmest people in the world, and the most generous. You could say, oh, they're like the least generous because they're always ripping you off, and I've got tons of stories about that. Oh my God, there are stories that, like I rented a apartment or an office. My wife wanted me to rent an office for her like little massage business with a friend, and we rented an apartment from this guy, but then it turned out that he wasn't the real owner of the apartment. He was subleasing it from the real owner, who thought that but he never paid the guy money, and he'd been renting it for 3 years and never paid the guy a penny, but had been collecting money from all of these renters in that, like, a office building. And like, but it's like, who do you believe? It's like, why don't you just come and tell the people who are renting the office then? And so, you know, there's like, they're just lying and cheating each other. And of course me, like, I had trouble getting paid for some people, like give a class and then they don't even pay for the class. And then be like, oh, I'll pay later, I forgot, you know, and then they never pay. Or like underpaying you, they do that too. You give them the bill and then they pay you less than the classes that they had, or a lot less. And just because they think they can get away with it or something. Yeah, stuff like that. And those are the rich people actually that do that more than the poor people. Poor people I've never had a problem getting paid. But you could say that they're the most generous people in the world. Like buying movies on the street. Sometimes the guy will just give you an extra movie just because after you paid him and you got all the movies, you'd be like, yeah, here's another one. Like, neither of that stuff in those two extremes I would see in America. Like, in America, you give the guy the money for the movie and he gives you what you paid for. But, you know, in America, if you charge somebody for a class, they'll pay you for what they got. And then the most, like, you know, you say they're the coldest people. They can also be the warmest people. Like, well, my wife, and just acting warmly and cheerfully. And it's usually the poor people who act warm and cheerful, and the rich people who act cold. But the most tweaky thing, the weirdest thing about Chile, is the difference between the rich and the poor. How their personalities are different, and how they don't communicate with each other, and how they don't like each other or trust each other, and how they're both wrong. And it's like this weird dichotomy, this weird impassable thing. And how the poor people wish that, like, they hate the rich, but they also wish that they were the rich. Like, there's this thing that poor Chileans do. They push, like, carts around, shopping carts, at the supermarkets, the big expensive supermarkets, and fill them all the way up, and then walk around in them and then leave, because they can't buy that stuff. And so they do it maybe so they can pretend that they were rich, or that they could feel like that, I don't know, have a conversation with other rich people in there and think that they're rich, make them think that they're rich or something. Some kind of bizarre. And then when cars came out with air conditioning, some of them would drive around in their old cars in town with all of the windows rolled up, hoping that somebody with money, or somebody who they knew, would see them drive around and then think that they had air conditioning, so then they're rich, so then they're one of the cool people. And the rich don't talk to the poor. Like, they think that they're better than them, like more worthy, which will do a job on, like, everybody's brain, a negative effect. One example of that is, like, my wife, her best friend got a job somewhere, and I guess made friends with, like, one of the rich girls who lives up in Vitacura, and they were gonna go out, and my wife was like, oh, invite me, and she goes, oh no, oh yeah, my wife went out with them once, and then they were gonna go out again, and she was like, oh, invite me, and then she goes, oh, but they don't want you to come along because of the way that you talk. I guess her dialect was of the poor person dialect, and they didn't want to have anything to do with her because she had the poor person dialect. They were beneath her. And then another thing, that same girl actually said that, oh yeah, there's this woman, she's into aromatherapy, because I was talking about it, who I work with, and I guess it was the same company that I work at. And she goes, oh, but she's a rich person, so you can't talk to her. And later I was like, what was, I asked her, but she'd like changed the subject or something, or had to go or something like that. So I asked my wife later, I was like, what was that about? And she goes, oh, yeah, rich people, they don't talk to you. You can't talk to them. They won't communicate with you. Like at all. Even if you're interested in the same thing, they're like, mm. And I actually experienced that once. I was giving English classes like 2 times a week to this woman whose grandfather was on the Supreme Court of Chile, and whose father is one of the top 20 lawyers of Chile, she said, and whose husband was one of the top lawyers of Chile, but he died. And one day I was in the house like waiting for the class to start, or because she was arriving late and her father was there, and I was in the same room with the father, the older guy, and he wouldn't make eye contact with me at all, even though it was for like 5 minutes. He was just sitting there staring at the wall and like looking really stern. And I think it's because I was a teacher, and even though I was American, I was a teacher, which made me of a lowly class. So don't talk to that person, he's beneath you. And they have that idea about, and I had that same experience with her sister was like a rich lawyer, and her husband was a rich lawyer, and their neighbor, who was in like another rich part of town, El Curo, was standing at the gate trying to come in along with me, and he didn't want to like talk to me or look at me at all either. It was like that, I won't even talk to you or look at you or anything. It was kind of like what my wife was saying. And when I did have classes with some of her kids, these rich kids, I'd tell them where I live, and he'd be like, what, you live there? And you ride your bike from here to here, from there and back? And he's like, well, how did you even survive? Wouldn't you get attacked and mugged? And I actually did get attacked and mugged by my bike. But I was like, but that's because I wasn't riding fast. I was like, oh, you just ride fast and you don't stop and talk to anybody. And he's like, oh my God. And my wife actually had a boyfriend who was a rich guy. His father owned a big mechanic store, auto mechanic store up in like the rich part of town, like Vitacura. And had like 50, mechanics working for him, and he was in the office all day long. And he was her boyfriend for like 2 years, but she never went to his house. Because he told her he was supposedly in the process, he was divorced, and he lived with his parents, and his parents didn't want to meet her because she was poor, I guess. So that's why she could never go to his house. But she knew where his house was. And then, but finally one day, because she was really familiar with the guys who worked for him at the auto mechanic place, the guys were like, look, he's married. That house is his house. He's got kids. You're his mistress. Wake up. So she was like, oh, of course, that's why he won't. But he was telling her this the whole time. So I guess I kind of got distracted, and that's a change of subject, because that's another weird thing about Chile, is that they'll lie. Because then she confronted him. She goes, yeah, well, I found, you're married, and that's why you won't let me go to the house, see your house, and that's not your parents you live with, but you live with your wife. And he just denied it. He just said, no, we'll get married one day. I'm divorced. We'll get married one day, but now's not the time to tell my parents. We'll tell them later. And they just say later, and deny, all the way as far as they can go. And that's another thing. I actually saw that in Argentina too. Later means never, like literally. I was in a English class once, and one of the questions, it was a conversation class with a bunch of people working at the IRS building, and one of the questions was, what are you going to do tomorrow? And I was expecting an answer like, oh yeah, I'm going to wash the car, I'm going to go for a walk. But they go, well, what does this mean? What are you going to do tomorrow isn't tomorrow, or what are you going to do tomorrow isn't, what are my goals for like the rest of my life? Like, what's on my bucket list type of a thing? And I go, No, yeah, the question is tomorrow, like, yeah, the day that follows this day. Because tomorrow means, like, whenever. I was in Argentina, and there was this woman, my neighbor in this apartment building, who was like, give me a massage, like a foot massage or something. I told her I was a time server. But I was really busy working on something. And I said, yeah, tomorrow. And I meant that. I meant tomorrow. And she goes, what? You're never going to give me a foot massage, you asshole. And she freaked out on me, man. Started screaming, yelling at me, walked in my room, refused to leave. I had to, like, physically force her out of my room. And then she, like, hated me after that. It was weird, dude. But, yeah, so... and I've got other stories, too, about how they'll lie, and they'll, like, never, even if you bust them red-handed and bust them, they'll never admit, ever. But I don't want to, that kind of gets into her personal life with her, like, ex-husband and stuff, and I don't know if I should talk about that. But, yeah, busting him, like, for two-timing, being unfaithful, and then just denying it. But the main subject of the video is how the rich and the poor have different personalities and how they don't communicate with each other. The poor don't understand the idea of having an opinion, and that's where the whole raisin head dirtbag thing goes in. They don't understand. They just believe stuff because they believe stuff, and if you ask them why, they'll say because. And then if, you're like, well, give me one reason why. Like for example, I think what happened was I got in trouble once for, like, massaging the feet of my wife's brother's girlfriend. And my wife barged in and was, like, furious with me and told me to let go. And if he found out, he'd freak out on me and stuff. And I think her friend was there, so I asked her friend that, or I asked her friend something else, some of these, like, rules. Because these third world countries, they always have these rules that don't make any sense. Like in Korea, you can't take your shirt off even if you're hiking in the middle of nowhere, or your socks off. I go, why? And she goes, because. And I was like, well, give me one reason why. Well, because, that's a reason. Oh, okay, well, I guess because is a reason. Okay, well, then give me another reason. Give me another reason why. Why can't you massage the feet of your other man's wife? That wasn't the thing, but it was like one of these other. And she goes, because that's the way it is. And I was like, oh, well, I guess that's another reason. The first reason is because, and then the second reason is because that's the way it is. And I'd be like, well, how about a third reason? Oh, I'm tired, I gotta go. So that's basically. And if you ask them to define stuff, like what a word means, because the poor people, they use a lot of slang that I don't understand. So I ask them what the slang is, and they tell me what the slang word means by giving me another slang word that I've never heard before. So then I ask them what that slang word means. So then they give me another slang word that I've never heard before. And this is once that happened with my wife's brother's girlfriend. So then she gave me like 15 slang words, and I was like, all right, well, now I know 15 slang words, none of which I know what the meaning is. It's a lack of ability to explain stuff, but it's actually, more importantly, not just the lack of the ability to explain stuff, but the lack of ability to see the point in having an opinion about something. Like, they don't have an opinion about stuff, but they don't even understand why you would have an opinion about something. Like you would say, like, there is this kid, there is this kid selling candy at this little candy thing in some little town. And then right next to him was a candy machine. And instead of getting candy from the kid, I went to the candy machine and I put my money in and no candy came out. So I go to the kid and I go, oh man, I just spent the last of my money on the candy machine. I could have given it to you and gotten candy. And I was like, you should tell your boss to like do something about that. Like, get the candy machine taken away because people are just going to spend their money on that and not get anything. He's like, yeah, I don't care, not my problem. I was like, no, but don't you think that you would make more money if you just tell people that it's broken? Oh, I don't care, not my problem, I don't want to deal with that. Like, and he didn't get it, he didn't care. Yeah, so the poor people, they don't understand having an opinion about stuff. But the rich people are totally different. And they even speak with a different accent. Like the poor people, they talk like this really fast, and they have all these new words and they've never heard before, and they like, oh yeah, well, como está, oh, come on, yeah. And when they talk, they sound really stupid, man. Like I can't even. It's like listening to fingernails scratching freaking blackboards when you hear some of these like poor Chileans talk. They sound so dumb. But the rich people, when they talk, they're kind of like the Spanish, like, hey, yes, but they still talk like, they still say huevón all the time, but their opinions, they have opinions. Totally different from the poor people. They have opinions, and very strong opinions. But they are so set in their opinions that they're not going to discuss it. That's how sure of themselves they are. So you basically, and they all have the same opinion. So, and you can't, like, for example, one of my, a lot of my classes that I gave to rich people were conversation classes, and it's just this list of conversation topics that you read out and then they answer, just to keep it professional and to keep the subject varied. So I get to hear the same question, the same answer, over and over again from all the different people. And one of the questions is there life anywhere in the universe besides the Earth? And the answer is no. And then it's why, and then they're like, no. But they don't say why. It's like, no, next question. No discussing it. Once a girl asked me, she's actually Brazilian, but she asked me what I thought about George Bush's agenda, foreign policy, and I said I agreed with it, and I just wanted to like see if she could, because I knew that she didn't, because if you're not American, you don't agree with George Bush's policy. But she just rolls her eyes and then didn't want to talk about it. So in Chile, if somebody disagrees with you about something, then you're just going to roll your eye, and then, well, that's that. We'll agree to disagree, and that's why like even married couples aren't allowed to, or don't even tell each other who they vote for president. It's supposed to be a secret that's only for you, and you won't even share your wife or your husband. I asked my wife who she voted for, and she refused to tell me. And I said, what the fuck? I'm married to you. I don't give a dick who you're voting for. Tell me who you're voting for. She goes, no, I will not tell you who I'm voting for. You do not do that here. And I was like, oh my God. And yeah, a lot of my teachers, because I was there for the elections when Michelle Bachelet beat the conservative old rich man. Yeah, a lot of my students were like, yeah, we don't tell each other. We don't tell our husbands or wives or anybody who we're voting for, because you can't discuss that kind of stuff. They don't know how to argue. The rich people know how to forcefully force their opinions on you and insist on stuff. They sure do know how to do that, but in a really rude way. I did a conversation class with this girl, and it was the first class, and I was like, yeah, we're going to do a conversation class, but let's start a little bit with the pronunciation just so that you know the rules, and then we'll talk. And at the end of it, like, her father was over in the next room. He's like, yeah, let me introduce you to my father. I didn't even know he was there. And he's like, this is a conversation class. You have to only allow her to speak. And I was like, whoa. He's like, now good day to you. And I was like, whoa, okay. I should have been like, wait, hold on. Yeah, it was just pronunciation. The next day, conversation class. Anyway, didn't see her again. And then I had this class conversation with this young kid, the rich, super rich kid. And we were talking about, like, yeah, I think the elections and stuff, and we were having a conversation about like politics, and I was like, I think it was the last class, and it was kind of, and we both knew it was the last class of the season, and so we were kind of like being relaxed and stuff, and I was just trying to like conversate with him. He was only like 15, but we weren't having a conversation. He was just, it was like having a conversation with Sarah Palin. He was just spouting off like agendas, and